Urinary infections, week on penicillin, the temperature would go down, 2 weeks off, the infection would be back, temperature up, down, no appetite. Most of us lost over 50% of our body weight.
No therapy. This was, to quote them, a waste of energy, time, and money.
That you're so depressed and so down that you think that if I ever get out of this damn mess, you know, you begin to think that it's not possible, that you are going to be laying there forever.
It was very depressing, and our plight was confirmed by such authoritative sources as Reader's Digest and Time magazine, who carried stories about the most pathetic injuries to come out of World War II, the court-injured people who would live only a year or two, that would never marry, would never leave the hospital, would never be employed, would never really have a life.
At that time, they had no provision for any disability of that kind. They put you in the northeast bedroom or the parlor or some room and kept you there in storage until you died.
The doctor told my parents that take me home and try to make me happy, that I probably would not live more than 6 months.
Take her home to die. Be good to her, take good care of her.
There were 60 court-injured patients on a ward, and there was one wheelchair, one of the big old wicker wooden models, and we asked for folding wheelchairs, and they wouldn't give them to us because we were going to die.
We were, sooner or not much later, going to die. That was the expectation before World War II, before penicillin became widely available, and it remained the expectation for many of us for years thereafter.
One of the doctors that was in taking Don's case assured me that Don would be dead in 5 years, and so I should plan my life accordingly, that if I wanted to take care of him that length of time, then he would be gone and I could go on with a, quote, normal life. And over the last 25 years, there have been many times I like to find that sucker and sue him for breach of promise. But he's dead now, and so here I am, still with Don, and the doctor's gone on to his finer rewards.
And they told me I would never play football again.
Kind of an understatement, wasn't it?
Yes.
Because we didn't know, you see. We hadn't been told whether or not it was injury. The injury was permanent. We just rented a wheelchair, and we rented it for 3 years. Finally, a friend of ours said, well, why don't you go ahead and buy it? You could always sell it if you wanted to get rid of it.
That's your life.
There were survivors, few at first, then more and more as acute medical care improved. But our survival was also a dilemma. How in the world, and where in the world, would we exist?
People didn't live in public in wheelchairs. You did not go out.
This was a whole new ball game. We had not lived out of the hospital. We didn't know whether we were going to be able to, how we was going to get along.
There were no books to tell you what's going to happen and no guidelines to follow. It's a little bit like the pioneers were going to the west. They knew where they wanted to go, but there were no routes to follow.
Pioneers. In this film, some are survivors of polio, most of spinal cord injury. None for less than 20 years. Some started very young, some not so young.
I had polio in 1951 when I was 2.5 years old.
I was injured when I was 16 in a car accident.
Now it's 27 years.
28 years.
29. At my 29th anniversary.
It's over 31 years ago.
33 years this summer.
36 years ago.
40 years ago.
43 years ago, this month.
It will be 51 years next Saturday.
For the first time in history, large numbers of us are surviving into old age. The question is no longer, will we live, but how well? And that question hinges on how it was.
Society moves on. You go to school, then you become married, and then you have a family. Well, being not married, being disabled, being unable to navigate like other people, you're left clear out.
Being a child with a disability back in the 50s was very hard. I think it was a lot harder than it is today. There was a lot more of what I call the you can'ts philosophy that existed back in those days. And by you can'ts, I mean it was like society and others around us telling us all the things that we can't do.
Shut out. You're shut out of society. It's a don't. It's a don't. It's a can't. You can't. You can't.
They said quads don't drive at that time. They tell you quads don't drive.
In fact, when I asked my dad about a car and put hand controls on it, his answer was, well, nobody ever drove a car by hand. That's impossible. Well, it is, and I've driven by hand since 1938 and probably have driven over 1 million miles.
You can't go to school like regular kids because you're different, and it isn't right to mix the two of you together. It isn't fair for those other kids to have to go to school with you.
They had a ramp, they had an elevator, there was no reason not to go there, except I was told I couldn't. They would just simply write back in the letter and state I could not go because I was in a wheelchair.
You call loneliness a tragedy, or do you not call it a tragedy? Yes, it is when you're young.
People looking at you like, what are you doing here, you know?
And no one would hire you.
You just simply couldn't get a job. Very few of the guys were able to.
I went to Department of Vocational Rehabilitation, not really knowing what their function was. I thought maybe they got jobs. And they said no.
Oh, he said, you have about as much chance of rehabilitating this young man as you do that skeleton hanging over there.
I was thoroughly qualified. I could read blueprints 40 feet long, all the materials, all the breakdown.
But I was told then that no school would hire me in a wheelchair.
With the private law firms that I applied to, and there were probably 250 of them, I did not receive one opportunity for an interview.
But it was very, very frustrating to see all these rejections and a lot of them saying, essentially, we don't want you because you're disabled.
One of the biggest stereotypes that I found that society had about people with disabilities, that we become asexual, that when you become disabled, you lose your sexuality, you lose your genitals, they just disappear when you become disabled. And it's an incredible phenomenon that society seems to think occurs.
The injury made me feel neutered. I didn't feel male or female or anything, and when they would say she, I would always wonder if they were talking about me. The lower part of my body seemed totally foreign to me, something that I just carted around. It was something to put my shoes on.
And I wanted to be married. I wanted somebody close to me and to visit with, to talk with, to discuss things with.
Whether the you can'ts came from society, from health professionals, or from ourselves, and they did come from all three sources, we decided to challenge them. We decided to prove that we could.
You fight back, and that's what we did.
We went to school, got degrees, got jobs, got married, raised children. Some of us led lives of spectacular achievement, some lives of spectacular normality. What we had in common was living our own lives by our own standards.
Life is taking your family to church, it's going to your children's program at the school, it's having your in-laws over for dinner, it's going to a restaurant to eat, or going to a movie together. You know, it's work, it's staying home and watching TV. That's our experience of life. And it's slow, it's slower than a lot of our friends, but I'm saying that it's normal in its slowness.
We speak of life in the slow lane, not always with fondness, not always with regret. Some feel that our long experience with physical limitations might be a real advantage. That to us, there are aspects of aging that may be old news, not just bad news.
It's often occurred to me that somebody who has a severe injury becomes old almost the day after the accident. In that sense, I've been working at being old for a long time, or learning how to be old.
As the number of survivors has grown, there's been concern that we were getting old before our time, that muscles and joints used to wheel and make transfers to substitute for strong arms and legs are becoming worn out prematurely.
I see some increasing debilitation, and I see that as occurring a little faster than had I not lived my life as a paraplegic.
The last couple of years have been tough because of the increase of diaphragm pain, which drains on your energy level.
I mean, I'm getting arthritis in my wrists and hands, and I'm always terrified I'm going to lose my hands or my shoulders.
It's like, is this the beginning of the deterioration and it's going to get worse and worse?
It's like feeling old too fast. It's too soon to feel that.
We have had our problems, but maybe not so many as feared. For the most part, people say their health is good, not bad, that they have more control over their health, not less.
My health is good, but I take darn good care of it.
I can't remember the last time I was hospitalized.
There's nothing wrong.
Well, my health has just been better and better.
How's your energy?
My energy? No.
If I get in a hurry and try to do something for 30, 40 minutes, I'm finished. I mean, I gotta stop.
The energy level has gone down. I term it an aging process.
As we've gotten older, we've had to modify our surroundings, to change the services and equipment we use for mobility, for health maintenance.
So I went to the power chair, which means you have to have a van. And thank goodness I could have a van.
Power wheelchairs, respirators, vans, lifts, hoists, environmental controls, remodeling. These are new costs of living, and they're major. How much did that chair cost you?
A little over $5,000.
It cost me about $20,000 to buy the van, and about $6,000 for the special equipment that goes in it.
From the first days of our disabilities, we've had to meet extraordinary expenses. In the old days, social services were sometimes there to help, sometimes not. Sometimes saving the day, sometimes not. The good news about welfare, for almost all of us, is that we aren't using it now.
My wage just wasn't enough to do it, and we had to have welfare aid. So we were on it for a good 2 years, and we're very glad to get off, but we could not have financed those beginning years without it.
Disabilities are expensive. They're not only great fun, but they are very expensive. It's because you have added costs in most everything you do.
The major expense that I incur is having to hire an aide. And I spend at least $1,000 a month to do that.
$1,000 a month. Expenses like these affect not only our discretionary income, but our aging plans as well. And after a lifetime of working, we find that Social Security sends us a mixed message.
To be eligible for some of the state programs and federal programs, a person has to be almost penniless, which means that to qualify for those, I need to use up all of my resources now and cannot use any of my resources at a later time. And that time is approaching rather rapidly now.
Built into our social welfare system, still, are work and self-help disincentives.
And they told me if I earned over $40 a month, they'd raise my rent. I figured that comes to a little over $1 a day. It's ridiculous.
There are instances when you do have to have that incentive where they make up that margin that you cannot meet, and then as your income increases and you can meet that margin, then their aid is cut down. But this idea of you have to not make anything and they'll do it all is such a ridiculous premise.
We wonder, after lives with more expense and less earning power, if we'll ever be able to retire. Or will we have to work until we die? The question of early retirement has come up.
If one quit work before they were 65, was it your duty to be a super quad until you died? Or does a person at some point in their life start doing the things that they really haven't had time to before and just kick back and relax? And
What would you have proved if you'd worked for another 10 years?
probably nothing, that I was dumb.
Technological society everywhere is emphasizing youth, and that aging is a great embarrassment, a sort of hidden secret, and a great surprise to people as they get older. And on the most trivial levels, people just can't handle the idea that their bodies and minds change.
We know about change. Our disabilities changed our lives, fundamentally. And the combination of aging and disability is bringing new change.
My legs and my back are her mobility, and that will go away someday, and then we'll have to make the adjustment.
My mother has provided my personal care for 29 years, and her age is 78.
Things are changing. Of course, my wife is 68 years old.
Our families, our support people, are getting older along with us. Some of us have lost our spouses, and our lives have changed forever.
That was an awful hard time. I never thought it would happen. I thought I would die before Dean.
And it was tough. That was tougher than my spinal cord injury, I think.
I cooked dinner for myself for maybe the first 10 days after Dean died, and it was too depressing. And I found myself like the 9th and 10th day sitting in the kitchen eating crackers and cheese, which is a dumb habit. And I thought, what the heck, I'm going to start eating out. I'm up most every afternoon. That's my time. And it's almost like a family in a couple of the cafeterias.
We've had change, both lesser and greater, but most of it seems to be the stuff of ordinary life, the normal consequences of getting older. Generally, we like our circumstances. But equally generally, We do fear the future.
When it reaches a point where I am not able to care for myself at all and don't have the resources available to pay somebody to come in and help me, it's a terrifying thought for me.
That possibility of losing our independence scares us all. Becoming independent was the principal accomplishment of our lives, and now we're afraid that might change.
What's the additive inverse of 8? Negative 8. Independence is a real fine line for me with my disability being a C5-6 quad. Usually I am fully independent, but if something happens that makes me a little bit weak, I can feel myself crossing over that line and not being able to do everything that I normally can do, or finding it extremely difficult.
And some of us dream darkly about the time we can't sustain ourselves, can't prevail.
I think what would happen at that point is that I would end up on welfare with food stamps and eventually end up in a nursing home. And depending on how soon that point comes will be how long I spend in a nursing home. And God forbid it may end up being 20 or 30 years in a nursing home. I'd rather be dead. I wouldn't be in control of my life anymore. And being in control of my own life is the most important thing to me.
And so that I had just very dispassionately decided that when that time came that I could no longer be independent, that I would just, check out.
Then I would think about killing myself. But I don't know if you want to put that on the tape.
People with disabilities were once routinely warehoused in nursing homes. Out of sight, out of mind. Of course we're scared of them. But it's good news that so very few of us are living in one. That for most of us, there are feasible alternatives. And as we get older, it seems that unqualified independence is no longer the one, the only goal. We're not so fiercely independent anymore.
As the years have passed, I've really changed my attitude toward that checking out. Certainly, it's not such an absolute thing with me anymore. I can now see that existing and requiring some assistance might not be such a terrible thing.
It's kind of like you've proved your independence and now it's okay. Now it's okay that someone else can take out the trash.
Being dependent is just not that unusual for anybody in the population. So it's not just a spinal cord injury, disability related issue for me, which it used to be.
I think that's what aging and dying is about. That is what happens, is people have to let go of whatever they've done in their life. All you take with you when you die is your state of mind, and the rest of it drops away.
Collectively, it seems we're letting go a little here, adding on a little there. Still cutting and pasting, still adjusting, still coping admirably, still making plans for the future.
Our future looks, I think, very bright. Don insisted that he put part of everything we were making away in case of an emergency. Well, this is, I guess, our emergency life and living it and getting on with it and doing fun things together.
Longevity is the emergency?
Yes.
I'm not afraid of getting old. No, I can see what I'm going to be doing, I think, for the next 20, 30 years, if I live that long.
I've made plans for the future. I'm going to move to a military-oriented retirement community where there'll be a dining room, so I won't have to lug groceries. There'll be a infirmary.
At this point in my life, my disability is an inconvenience, whereas I don't think I would have said that 20 years ago.
It's life, and life is all right.
I can't say that I like having a spinal cord injury. That's not true at all. But I've had a good life, and I've done a lot of things that have been very satisfying to me.
I think I've had a very, very good life. I've been lucky.
I take one day at a time, and I enjoy life.
I'm very, very happy. I'm happier now than I ever was at any time in my life for many, many reasons.
I just thought I never would learn to, you know, really feel whole and so satisfied as I do at this point.
Leaves me feeling today like I could probably live another 40 years.
My number was up 40-odd years ago, and so it's all been a bonus.
Do you think as you get older, people become more like you?
Or am I becoming more like them? I'm not sure, yeah.
There seems to be satisfaction. It seems that hard life circumstances are not the same thing as unhappiness. A tough break is not the same thing as a ruined life. It seems life can be hard, but good as well.
It's been catastrophic at times, but I don't view it as a tragedy. My life didn't go down the drain.
It happened, but you decide whether something is a tragedy or not. Not the event itself.
Not a tragedy. Not yet.